my God. Did you know what was going on outside when you left work today?
Yeah, I saw the snow. It was like, but I'm fortunate though, I'm like 5 minutes away. So it only took me an extra 5 minutes.
Well,
so even if I doubled my time, I did well.
Yeah. I figured it was a good chance to do the podcast today because it's going to take me forever to get home.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have snow tires on your vehicle?
I have all seasons.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's very slippery.
Yeah. It is very crazy. The people, the very first snowfall, everyone seems to lose their mind, so.
Yep.
Yeah. Plus, it's quite slippery because there's nothing really to adhere to, just straight bare pavement and fluffy snow or wet snow, depending on the actual temperature. So.
No, I'm actually not taking the perimeter home today.
That's what you usually take?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I can get home in 20 minutes by the perimeter. I'm not taking the perimeter home. South perimeter is always the worst hit, right? I think usually.
Right. That's true.
Yep. So. I'm gonna post this episode this weekend, and then the episode we're doing on the weekend, which we can pimp a little bit. We're gonna do that on That's the one we're recording on Sunday.
Right.
So we're gonna have Lauren Alder. That's her pen name.
Right.
So we're gonna have her on the show to talk about her book.
Yeah, we're gonna have it at the same place that KeyCon takes place.
Exactly, at the Radisson Hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of exciting. Kind of excited to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's given us some topics that I think she wants to talk about. I don't know if you saw the last email, so we'll cover that stuff on Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, not our first guest. I think the first guest I had on the show really was you.
Was me?
Well, back in the day when it was just me, I had you on as a guest.
Was that the first guest?
You were the first guest.
I'll have to go to the archives and check that out.
Yeah.
I don't remember what our conversation was.
I don't either. I think I might have to go back and maybe repost the link so people can see it. It was either you or Tracy. I can't remember who was first, but I think it was you.
Yeah, that'd be the pilot.
Yeah. I know the first episode with Tracy is the most downloaded episode still to this day. When I look at my top 10s, it's still number 1.
Wow.
I have no idea why. People still go back and to this day, still go back and download it. Like, I still get new downloads.
Well, once they know who she is and they'll probably be downloading anything that you have with her on it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, she's funny as hell.
Yeah.
Like, I still want to do an episode that we get all 4 of us together.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That'd be very fun. But we'll do that at some point. So, topic for today.
Right.
I've been holding off talking about this because it's a little too sensitive, I guess. But,
a little too sensitive?
A little too sensitive. I will admit, I had a couple of moments where I cried.
Oh, that's a tune. Okay, I thought you meant like a sensitive subject. It's hush-hush. A lot of controversy.
No, just... yeah, so, as we know, Stan Lee passed away.
Right.
And it's I don't know, it's a tough one for me because that's almost single-handedly the reason I read comics.
Right. And well, he's the reason probably a lot of people read comics.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So did they? So I didn't read the article of how. Like, do you know how he passed? Was it just in a hospital? Was it at home?
Yeah, I think he was at home. I mean, he was 95, so I mean, really, he died of old age. But I think there was heart and respiratory related stuff.
Right.
But the last year of his life has been fraught with a lot of problems.
Right.
It was the whole thing where claims were being made that his daughter was trying to defraud him, and there was some business partner that was stealing money from him. And he's got his own entertainment studio called the POW, like POW Entertainment. There was some issues there, and he had it's almost, he had a lot of health issues, like a lot of health scares and stuff in the last, and I almost think, you know, pretty much probably related to, like, I mean, his stress level the last year was really, really bad.
Yeah.
And his wife passed away.
How long ago did she pass?
Within the last year. The last year, yeah. She was 2 years younger than him.
Right.
So I think they were married for 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And Stan was totally smitten with his wife, like totally smitten, right to the last day.
He was what? Sorry.
Smitten. He's just totally,
smitten,
totally in love with his wife.
Right.
Like, never ever, you know, she was everything to him, and it was. I don't know.
Yeah, you have to be. I mean, if you're with a person, I mean, that's the thing. When you're going to be with a person for the rest of your life, you got to make sure that, you know, you guys are, you know, you like each other first off, and everything else. You guys have to have, you know, the same interests and what. Like, you guys can do separate things, sure, but the bulk of your time together should be, you know, it should be positive. It should be positive things. Should always be, you know, and that's good to hear that he got that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
With that, you're covered in snow.
I had to roll my window down because I can no longer see out my side window.
Oh.
It already got covered.
Okay. Well, be careful.
No, I'm being careful.
So all we need is a live action crash on the podcast.
No, we're not doing that. I'm actually driving really slow, and people are passing me, and I really don't give a shit.
Right. And they're looking at you, and they look at you, and they go, "Look at this guy, he's talking to himself." So I noticed that there were a couple of memes or a couple of things that people had posted, and they weren't very flattering. I think it kind of peed off a few people.
Sure.
I can't remember what they were, but they weren't positive things. But so let's go back, Stanley, at the very beginning. Okay. So the first time you heard his name, where were you and what were you doing that you remember?
Well,
like, were you reading a comic and who wrote this? This was what's that?
It was definitely reading a comic, that's for sure.
Okay, so that was the first time you saw his name.
Yep. Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so at that point, did you research him at all, or did you just kind of just kept reading comics and or there's a different comic that came out and you went and bought that one? At what point did you actually go, okay, who is this guy?
Well, okay, so the way I figured it out, I can't remember which comic. It's down to probably one of two comic books. Okay. If I really wanted to look it up, I could probably give you the issue number. But I always had comic books as a little kid.
Oh yeah.
Always. So there was a comic that I had that had it was Spider-Man teaming up with Captain Britain.
Captain Britain?
Captain Britain, yeah.
Does that character still exist?
Oh yeah. Yeah, okay. Captain Britain is one of my favorite all-time characters. Definitely top 5 for me. And it's because of that moment. So Spider-Man teams up with this young, brash superhero named Captain Britain. He's impetuous, he's a bit of a dick, a little bit cocky and arrogant. And Spider-Man, who used to be that guy, kind of shows him the ropes on, you got to be a hero and all this sort of stuff. And I remember at the first page of that issue, it says Stan Lee Presents. It said that on every single comic. Stan Lee Presents.
Oh, so it's in your face. Every time you open it up, it's right there. It's not like in the back portion saying, "Oh, author is such and such."
Oh,
or whatnot.
no.
He's like right at the front.
Stan's name was on everything. So
it's like SeanMcGinnity.ca.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good website. Everyone could go check out.
Yeah.
And back then, Stanley, like when I got into it, Stanley was already done writing. Like, I mean, he wrote the odd issue here and there, but he was done writing. He was in charge of Marvel, and that's all he was doing. But he still had a letter column called Bullpen Bulletins, and he had his own little section in there. You know, when you open up a magazine, there's a word from the editor. They're kind of describing what the issue's about.
Yeah, I've seen some of those. Yep.
It's kind of like that, but it's not about the issue. It's just they plopped it in every comic book, and it's just Stan talking about something, kind of hyping what Marvel's doing right now, or we're down to Hollywood, true believers, and we're working on a deal to get Spider-Man on TV, or he was always talking about stuff like that, like what was going on, and that sort of
news.
Yeah, it was
comic news.
It was comic news.
Yeah,
and he was very very prominent in the book, even though he wasn't writing. He was very prominent in the book, and that was my introduction to him. So at some point, I got some old reprints because he did writing for Marvel, which was Timely Comics and became Marvel Comics. He wrote from 1961 to 1972, and then he he at one point he was writing 10 different titles a month. So
titles like just Spider-Man, a whole bunch of different ones, or are you talking about different characters with different comics?
Yeah, different comics, like 10 comics a month at one point. So, he was writing Spider-Man, he was writing Fantastic Four, he was writing Iron Man, he was writing the X-Men, he was writing Doctor Strange.
Now, were these characters created by him?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so these were all his own characters.
Yeah, created or co-created, right? Because he would create the character with the artist, and they did something that was called the Marvel Method. So he would work with the artist on the concept. We need somebody who does this and kind of does that. And, he's a teenager. He's a human spider. Jack, draw me a human spider. And he shoots webs out of his wrists. And so then the artist would come back and well, what do you think of this, Stan? Let's add some blue on the legs, and then we'll add maybe a big spider on the chest, or like they kind of go back and forth designing the character.
Right.
And then once the character was created, then Stan would give a synopsis for what the first issue is going to be, and it would be like a one paragraph thing. So he'd say, okay, well. He would say, Peter Parker, his aunt is ailing and he has to fight a supervillain and get across town to get her medicine. But he's having a hard time getting across town because he's fighting a supervillain, and he's got to get the medicine to Aunt May on time. And that's the plot synopsis. So then the artist goes back and draws 22 pages of story. Mm-hmm. And builds a story around that synopsis.
With no words.
With no words. Then the pages go back to Stan, and he has to put all the letters in. So he's got to cut. So from that point, he's actually creating a script for the story to match what the artist drew. Right. So he's essentially... instead of writing the script beforehand and telling the artist what to do, he's giving the artist free range to draw the story and determine where the action panels are and how many panels a page and what sort of actions happening and what sequence of events, like all that stuff. Then Stan has to actually go, and he's almost writing a script against that. And that was the Marvel method. So Stan would give, to his artists, Jack Kirby and Sal Sal Buscema and John Romita and Steve Ditko is, okay, here's a one paragraph. This is what's going to happen. Do it.
Right. Now, do you know, is that the same method that they write comics now?
It's a little bit changed from then. Like, it's still kind of similar. Some of the writers will offer, like, maybe a couple-page synopsis for what the issue is supposed to be. Like,
right.
But other writers, like, I actually spent probably about 20 years learning how to script a comic book. Mm-hmm. Because there was nothing out there that told you how to do it. So right. I studied a lot and figured out, like, how is the script written. And there's no one way to do it.
Right. Now, when you write a comic, do you write the panels first and then put the story in after?
No.
No. Okay,
no,
so
I write the whole
you don't use the Marvel method.
No. Well, when I was a kid, I was doing everything on my own, so I would actually plot what was going to happen in the issue.
Right.
And then I would draw it, keep it, and do the word balloons at the same time. Which is not a good way to do it, because you could be like, I don't know, 16 pages in and realize, shit, I forgot something.
Right.
So once I, learned how a script actually works, I would actually script the whole thing, and I would do it like a movie script, but I would just go at full length, fully describing each panel on each page, how many panels a page. I would do a thumbnail sketch, so I kind of knew visually how it could work.
Mm-hmm.
I would write the script, and then once the script was done, I would convert the script into art. That's how I was doing my last stuff.
Okay.
Because I kept making mistakes, like, well, what am I supposed to do about page 2? I need to insert a page in here, and I don't know, like, how am I going to do that? So I started studying Alan Moore scripts. I found a bunch of Alan Moore scripts, the guy that wrote Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I actually found a bunch of his scripts, and I started basing my scripting on how Alan Moore did it, which was super hyper detailed, lots of description. The artist just draws what the writer says.
Right.
There's a potted plant, 3/4. So in panel 1, there's a potted plant on a table. It's a mid shot, so you can see the whole table in the panel. There's a guy standing to the left 2 feet from the table. There's a guy standing 1 foot from the right on the table. He looks bemused, like, that detailed. Like, that's how I was writing my scripts. And when I did the Simca comic online, that's what my scripts looked like. Hyper detailed, no interpretation for the artist to take. Just draw this.
Well,
so that's how scripting works. More or less.
Is that your windshield wipers?
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering what I can hear this. It sounds like a wounded walrus.
A wounded walrus.
A wounded walrus. Yeah. Yeah, winters are great.
Yeah, it's awesome. So anyway, that's how it works. So I wanted to use the Marvel method. Okay, if I was working directly with an artist, had I done Simca different, I think that's how I would have wanted to do it. Here's the general points that are going to happen, and have a much looser script.
Right.
So the artist could, basically collaborate with me, right?
Right.
That's what I wanted to see happen, but I was still learning at the time, and I didn't know if I'd ever be in that situation. And then it could end up... It's more of a... What are you going to say?
It's more of a group... That's more of a group way of doing it versus doing it yourself, where you kind of have to do your own writing and your own panels, and then you can kind of do it the way you want, instead of just saying to somebody, this is what I want to do from here to here. This is the scene. This is what's going to be in it. You draw it, and then I'll add everything afterwards.
Yeah, and then some artists like working in differently. Some want to have as much creative control as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to, I don't need a lot of instruction. I know how to put a page together. Like, just tell me what you want to happen, and I'll figure out how that's going to take place.
Right.
But still others, like, they want, like when I worked with Kathy, she wanted that full detailed script. Right. I want a detailed script. I want to know exactly what you want to see in every panel. I even provided thumbnails for her, kind of like a small kind of, stick figure sketch of what the panel's going to look like, what each panel will look like. That's how we did it.
Right.
So, different methods. Wow, that was a crazy tangent.
Different what?
That was a crazy tangent.
Well, no, that's good, because you're showing the way that he wrote with his own Marvel method versus what you've done, and the different ways that you've done yours.
And I know some people like they complain about Stan, like, oh, he didn't create anything. The artist did all the work. I know that's kind of a common criticism that came up over the years, but when you look at it, sure, he only provided like a paragraph of detail, but he still had to script the whole thing after.
Right.
And to do 10 titles a month?
Now, prior to Stan Lee coming into the picture with comics, who was actually writing comics prior to him? Or was it just a whole different...
Oh, God.
Because I remember seeing comics, they were like the old westerns, and they had guns, and you could see the way the fire would come out of them.
Yep.
Almost like a weird thing. I don't know what type of comics they were, but I remember we had those.
Yeah, I remember.
I'm not too sure, and I'm not too sure, what genre, like what it was about.
Some of those were Marvel comics too, actually.
Oh, they were?
Yeah, some of them were. There was Rawhide Kid, Kid Colt, the Apache Kid, and a few others. And then DC had a bunch of their own as well. So I had quite a few of those. But back before Marvel came into prominence, there was a tendency for the writer and artist not to get much credit. And in fact, I think this was kind of the thing. Like, Bob Kane created Batman, for example, and he often was credited on stories he never drew because it was his creation.
Right.
So the credit went to him, and it was like a ghost artist. I think that's how that worked. So that was a common practice where credit was never given. It's like, well, this is a DC comic. It's created by DC Comics. We're not going to give any credit to anybody.
We're not going to tell you who wrote it. We're not going to tell you who drew it. We're not going to tell you.
Yeah,
it's all the owner of the company saying, it's all me, buddy.
Well, they kind of, it's almost like they wanted like Batman to always look the same, like the same art, the same writing style. They didn't want to change the formula, maybe because they're afraid that, people knew there was a different formula being used, that they might be less interested.
Right.
Right. So I think there was a bit of that going on. But
when you're used to someone writing a certain way for a certain character, and then someone else walks in and it's a whole different character altogether, it's like, what is this? It's like, it's the same as like when you're watching a show, I guess. Yeah. And all of a sudden, all the writers are different and the show is different. It's like, what happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing. So I guess I can see that. They want to keep the people. They don't want to advertise who they are because obviously they don't want anybody to
jump ship,
snatch them up, right?
Yeah. Well, that too. But they also they also really sucked at giving, not just giving credit, but by not having the name on the artwork or on the writing or whatever.
Right.
Then there was ownership issues they wouldn't have to deal with.
Right.
So there's a lot of those guys back from the 60s and especially like the 50s and 40s and stuff that not everybody got credit, and they got paid like a per diem, or not a per diem, but they got paid per page they turned in. You're going to get paid $5 a page, and that was it.
Starving artist wage.
Yeah. And that's how it was.
Right. Like
the creators of Superman, the two guys, I think one of them died penniless. And the Superman brand has made billions and billions of dollars. Not millions, but billions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So with the lunch boxes, like in everything, like they made a crap ton of money, and those guys, saw none of it. Stan was smart enough that he actually worked a deal where he was getting. There was a point where he wasn't actually working. I think he wasn't working for Marvel anymore, but they were still paying him a yearly salary of like $1 million a year or something like that, just because his name was on everything. So instead of paying him a percentage, like a royalty, they were paying him. Well, we're going to pay you $1 million a year. It was kind of his royalty in a way.
Yeah, the lesser of whatever he was going to get paid from them.
Well, yeah, because I mean, he could have got paid a lot more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at like the Marvel films and stuff, like he actually gets a producer credit on all that stuff.
Yeah, I guess he would.
So he gets back end dollars.
Wow.
But I mean, if you think about it, like I know some people don't want to give Stan the credit. Like there was a point where people were like, what about Jack Kirby? The artist Jack Kirby or the artist Steve Ditko or this artist or that artist. Like those guys didn't get paid fairly. And true, they did not get paid fairly, but let's keep in mind, Stan Lee was writing those comic books, and he was running the company, and he was their head of advertising. He's the guy that pounded the pavement and negotiated a lot of those Hollywood deals, like a lot of the cartoons that happened where, because he was the guy doing all the legwork. So to pay him in perpetuity, is that the right word? Makes sense.
Right. Yeah, because he's not just we call it not a one-hit wonder, but one guy coming in just doing one thing in the comic. Like he was right in there.
Well, he was doing lettering too.
Different aspects of the whole thing. So they couldn't really shut him out because he was pretty much most of the department maybe.
Right, but he was an artist too. But I mean, he's just stopped drawing. He was just doing writing. But he's done every stage of the process because he worked. In the 40s, he was working for another company, the company that created Captain America, and he actually wrote some Captain America comics in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And it took him till like 61. He was writing a lot of romance comics in between and all that sort of stuff.
So did you say he created Captain America?
No, he wrote Captain America. I think that might have been one of his first comics that he wrote. And then when Marvel happened, I don't know how it worked, but he was able to get the rights to Captain America, the Submariner, and the Human Torch, and carry them over to Timely or what became Marvel. I don't know how that legal part worked, but he brought those people back from the 40s because those were the first 3 Marvel heroes.
Right. So this Captain Europe or what was it?
Captain Britain.
Britain.
Yeah.
Captain Britain. This was created after Captain America, I'm assuming.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah.
Now, was there other ones created, like, I don't know, Captain Asia or Captain, Africa or Captain Germany or,
Well, the Captain Britain thing was a specific, I think Chris Claremont, the guy who wrote the X-Men for like 20 years or 30 years, he was writing for Marvel UK, so they actually had their own imprint over there on the other side of the pond to develop, because they were doing reprints of comics in the UK, and they'd put out these special editions, and it was just like a bunch of reprints. So you'd have like, I don't know, 4 or 5 issues in one big comic.
With changes, or are you just talking like a bundle?
No, just a bundle, and then the next month it would be the sequential issues. So you'd have issue 1 of Spider-Man, issue 1 of Daredevil, issue 1 of Iron Man, issue 1 of, I don't know, Fantastic Four, and then the second volume would have issue 2 of, Spider-Man and Captain America, like all those things. And then they would have one section in it that would be original content. So they created Captain Britain for that reason. Like, well, we need, and that's when Marvel UK kind of got started. So they'd be like, instead of a full 22 pages of Captain Britain, it'd be like 4 pages or 6 pages or 8 pages or whatever it was.
Right.
So that's where Captain Britain came from. They just wanted something that's like, well, Captain America, Captain Britain, that sounds good. But that's where Alan Moore got his start, was writing Captain Britain. And Alan Moore is like, after Stan, after Jack Kirby, like maybe one of the biggest industry people of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, he has books that have. I think he has a book that won a. I don't know if it won a Pulitzer, but it's won. His books have won, every writing award you can get that are not for comics.
Oh.
Like he's a highbrow writer.
Like novels.
Like what? What do you mean? What?
You mean like writing novels?
No, he's writing comic books.
Oh, no, but you said like he was getting every award for everything, that wasn't comic book related. Or
Like he's winning writing awards, like book writing awards for his comic.
Are these novels that he's...
No, but for his comic work. His comic work is so good and so high quality and so game changing that he was winning writing awards for his comic book work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So so anyway, he's one of my favorite writers for sure, but Stan's my number one for sure. Because I actually went through a period where Marvel was putting out because I wasn't alive for 1960 to 1972.
Right.
I was born in 71, so I missed the whole Stan Lee run. But as I got older, there was, they reprinted Spider-Man a lot. So I got a chance to read the first 8 issues of Spider-Man, the first 6 issues of the Hulk in reprint format many times. They would put it on. Remember those little digests you could buy from the not the 7-Eleven but the Green Gable stores. The
Archie comics and
so they used to do
the thicker book.
Yeah. So they would do Marvel ones like that. So one of those would have the first 6 issues of the Hulk, just reprinted.
Oh.
So I used to read all those. So, I was learning a lot of Stan stuff that way, and that's how I was getting my Stan fix. Right. That, and I read a lot of French comic books that were reprints as well, from the library or from wherever I could get them, and they would reprint old Stan issues all the time. So that's how I kind of read, really got introduced to him. Mm-hmm. And then later, when I actually had a job, when I had my first job, I found a comic, because comic shops weren't a thing back then, so if you wanted to find comics, good luck.
Right.
But I was able to collect a bunch more Stan stuff that way. And they put out something called Essential Spider-Man. So it was a black and white reprint of a year worth of Spider-Man comic books in one volume. So I started buying those. So I went through and read Stan's entire run on Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer, Avengers, Fantastic Four. Those are probably the main ones I read.
Right.
And I read everything he'd written in all those titles. Oh, and then X-Men. So I read all the issues he'd written, and then for Spider-Man, I just kept going. But
so he was the creative X-Men also.
He created X-Men as well. Yeah.
So all the characters.
Yep.
Oh, okay. How about the Fantastic Four?
Yep, he created the Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four was his first comic for Marvel.
Okay.
Spider-Man didn't come first. Fantastic Four came first. And that was his make or break comic, because he was going to quit. He told his wife, Joni, I'm sick and tired of the comic business. Been in it for 20 years, by that point, from the 40s to to almost the 60s. And he was sick and tired of it, because they were telling him the stories he had, the types of stories he had to write, the types of characters he had to have. They told him what he needed to write, and he was never allowed to be creative. It was just the same. He used to call it pap. I'd have to write the same pap, month in, month out. There was never anything exciting in these issues. It was always super boring.
Right.
And he was sick and tired of it. He's like, I want to write. I'm a writer. I want to write. I don't want to follow a formula. I just want to write. I want to write some good stuff.
Right.
And then Joni said, well, if you're going to quit anyway, why don't you write what you want to write? Write the comic book you want to write. Just do it.
Exactly.
And if they fire you, they fire you. And if they don't, well, then you're doing what you love. It's so the creation of the creation of the Marvel Universe is entirely Joni's fault. There's no doubt about it. He wouldn't have had the balls or the will or the belief in himself to do it if it wasn't for Joni. Joni's responsible for all of Marvel Comics, in my opinion.
Wow.
So
he has the major support that he needed.
Yeah. So anyway, so he said,
"Let's do it. Yeah.
I'm going to do it. Damn it, I'm going to do it." So he created the Fantastic Four, and that broke every comic formula. Like, there wasn't any comic like the Fantastic Four. You know, they didn't have real problems. Like, they had money problems. They, you know, the Ben and Johnny fought all the time.
Right.
They had one costume. Like, they all had the same costume.
Right.
The
same costume.
Yep. The same blue and black costume. Like, they all wore the same costume. Like, they were a team.
Oh.
But they were also family. So they had problems paying the rent. Susan, his wife, would get sick and tired of her husband because he was always in the lab. He was always working on the next experiment. Like, you have to make time for your family, you know. Like,
right.
Lots of family squabbles. Like, it was very realistic. So he
wrote lessons.
Yeah, he wrote that, and it sold through the roof. And they're like,
a lot of people could relate to it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. He grounded the heroes. So everyone went apeshit for it, and Fantastic Four, and thanks to Joni, it made Marvel. So they were renamed Marvel Comics, and then I can't remember what he followed it up with, but Spider-Man came in '63, I think it was, and again it was an idea he had that he wanted to do. Did it. There was Daredevil, and there was the Avengers, and he brought Captain America back.
Right.
And that was a big thing because Captain America, would stop being in the comics in the 40s at the end of World War II. I mean, there was other Captain Americas in between, but not the original. Right. And he brought him back. Like, oh my God, he's been on ice for 20 years, and now he was doing things that had never been done before in comics. So, for that alone, and then from that period of 1961 to 1972, he was I don't know if he was writing all the titles, but he was writing 90% of all the titles they had. Mm-hmm. And when it's I have an idea for a new comic, he'd just write that comic. It was insane. I don't know if there's anyone that has written as much content, as much good content, as him, period. Dickens or Steinbeck or all these great writers, all these great novelists. No one has had the level of output as Stan Lee, with characters that, if you think about it, all the characters that he created between 60 and 72 are all the characters you're seeing in the Marvel movies. It's all those same characters, and they, since the 60s to now, they're still relevant, they're still popular, they still sell a shit ton of comics.
Mm-hmm.
There's no
kids
one else
like comics.
Well, it's not even just kids, everybody.
And even adults, kids back then that are adults now grew up with those.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So everything that I write now, the novel that I'm working on right now, the one called Sweden,
mm-hmm.
I'm editing right now, and as I'm editing, I'm everything about these characters just breathes Stan Lee. I'm not ripping them off, but all his characters had hope. It was all about hope, the underdog. Spider-Man was always an underdog. He was always, he was never good enough to beat this guy, or he had so many problems, but he always found a way at the end to overcome everything. And I have that in every fucking thing that I write. That's what's happening. Every fucking thing that I write, it's about having hope and, maybe struggling a bit, but believing yourself in the end and overcoming, the hurdles in your life. And that's the life lesson I apply to everything. It's right out of Stan Lee's mouth. It's crazy.
Awesome. Wow. So where were you when you found out that he passed? What were you doing? How did you find out?
I was at work, and I got a text from Corey. I hadn't heard at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was at work, and I'm like, oh, and I kind of stopped what I was doing. I went for a little walk. I knew, because I don't know. I guess I mean, I knew it was going to come, but I mean, it's been 20 years since it was going to come.
Right. You didn't realize how much of an impact it had on you until that actually happened.
Yeah.
It was almost like losing a family member. Almost.
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how many times you know how I used to go to bed early at night so I could read my comic books? There I am reading Stan Lee stuff in my bed, 2 hours a night, reading and rereading and learning, you know, getting a moral compass from reading these things. And
right.
Like, I mean, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. It wasn't until, you know, like...
Well, we lived in the boonies, so...
Well, yeah, like, Stan Lee was...
Yeah, the comics, I had my guitar, so...
Yeah, like my friend was Stan Lee, in a way, you know? That's what I had, and that's, you know, that's how I got... A lot of the things came right from there.
Right.
So, like, I don't know, there's been a few negative things, and I know Corey wanted to talk about some of the negative things that came up in the press and stuff.
Right.
Like the Bill Maher thing. And I kind of didn't want to talk about that because some people slam, they're like, oh, you know, why is everybody crying over this guy? You know, he wrote comic books. Like, no, he didn't write comic books. He wrote works of art. Like, they weren't just comic books. That's the thing. He was such a good writer, and he wrote with such conviction that it was so big and so great that the comic pages couldn't contain his work. And Marvel and comics, if Stan had never come along and done the work he did with Marvel, then the comic world might still be popular today, but we wouldn't be having these movies. We wouldn't be having any of that stuff. That's all on Stan. Stan was the best promoter for comic books, but he also made comic books good and great at times.
Right.
And
well, he meant different things to different people. So, I mean, someone wants to slam him, like, hey, you know what? That's your prerogative. That's what he meant to you. He obviously didn't mean as much to you than a lot of other people. Some people just kind of dwell on anything negative that comes out versus the positive. So, I mean, different strokes for different folks. But I mean, it's nice to know that, you know, he made that much of an impact on you, and I'm sure he's done that on a lot of other people also.
Well, and everything I learned from that's what I've been trying to impart to my kids. Like it's not going to just stop with me or stop with, you know, my generation or the generation before me. It's just, you know, like, he was that important a cultural figure.
Right.
And I know some people, you know, they talk about, oh, you know, the great people in history. You know, President Obama, he did this and he did that and he did all these great things. Or, you know, some people talk that way about Pierre Elliott Trudeau, like all these things he did. I know some people don't like him, but whatever. But you can't deny that Trudeau had a lasting impact on Canada forever. He'll always be remembered. He's one of those guys, always be remembered. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, like, these are people that changed the landscape of humanity.
Right.
And, oh, Stan, he just wrote comics. No, he was actually more impactful than some of those figures. In a lot of ways, like, he represented, you know, standing up for your common man and loving your family and being kind to people and helping the underdog, like, and, you know, like, he promoted tolerance of people that were different, i.e., you know, people that are gay or, you know, a different color skin. Like, he believed in not homogenized, but a world where we're all one human race.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're alien, you got green skin, or whatever. Like we all have good within us.
Yeah. Well, we're all here. We all have to get along because, hey, we only have one planet.
Yeah. I mean, he promoted that more than, you know, there's people talk about these great people, but to me, he had more impact in making me not judge people and being accepting of people and not, looking past the color of someone's skin or their religion or their sexuality. I might be more judgmental of those things and not be a good person if I didn't go to the school of Stan.
Right.
I could have been taught by somebody else to hate, certain types of people.
Right.
But, my Bible was, reading Stan's comics, like, all the time. And he taught me good from bad and right from wrong. And, I don't know, what would have happened to me if I didn't have that. Like, that was my compass.
Right. He's like a humanitarian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He wasn't just a comic book, guy.
No.
A lot of people follow a lot of people, whether they're good people or bad people, for whatever personal reasons they have, because they have an interest in their views or their goals or whatever it is. But I truly think that there should be more people like him in that aspect anyway, and just the humanity portion where, everybody's, and you see in the news, I mean, these people are against these people and these ones are against these people. I mean, why?
Yeah.
I know there's deep roots in history on how everything's kind of gone, but I mean, as time goes on, I think people are more tolerable. Mind you, we live in Canada, which is, we've got a hodgepodge of everybody. So, yeah. I mean, it's whatever. I mean, that's just us. I mean, we grew up, with different ethnic groups, and it was like, whatever. They're just people like you and me.
Yeah.
But other people, because they're so segregated in where you don't have that mixture, you're kind of looking on the other side of the fence going, oh, like, what are they all about, type thing, right?
Yeah.
Instead of actually, talking to them and actually trying to figure stuff out. But, yeah, anyway, that's my kind of little rant there.
Yeah. So I guess to the people that are, been dissing, saying he's not dissing, but saying, well, he's not that important. So it's like, no, he is. I owe a lot to, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from, like, mom and dad and stuff. Like, they're amazing parents, and, I don't want to dismiss, what they've done for us, because,
right.
We're nothing without our parents.
Right.
But, when dad's not around or mom's not around, Stan is there, still telling me, how to do, how to be a good person.
Right.
How to not people.
Yeah. I think you're a product of your environment.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that. Whatever you grow up in, that's what you believe in, and that's, how you are. Whether you deem it as good or bad or evil or excellent or whatever. Everyone has their own, the way they grew up. And being that you grew up with Stan Lee in his, well, not just the comics, but even just his moral compass on the way that, he lived his life, and the things that you picked up on that that you took from him, and they were all positive. That's excellent. You can't fault that at all.
And and his love story too, like his love story with his with his wife. Like I look at that too. It's like he just worshipped his wife and treated her like the queen that she needed to be treated. Like he was so good to her. And I'm like, I try. To live up to that standard. Like, yeah, I've been with her for 7 years, and I still, it's not I still love her, but it's like, of course I love her. Like, how can I married my best friend, and I don't know. It's like that's the way. Like, I try to treat my wife really well.
Well, you treat people like you want to be treated. I mean, that's usually the go-to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And comics, and also comics for kids. Look at how that's been going. Getting people out there, these the comics in this whole world, you know, that they want to share with everyone else.
Yeah.
You know, it's a positive thing, and you want to spread it out.
I also learned to read I learned to read from comic books. You know, yeah, Mom taught me and that, but like I kept reading comic books so I could learn. You know, what is this? Like, what is this word? And, you know, I was just so fascinated with.
Yeah. So you're into more of the superheroes. I was more into the Richie Rich.
Yeah.
And Archie comics, more so the Richie Rich, because you would immerse yourself in that world where you would have, you know, an unrelenting amount of money and you could do whatever you wanted. You know, whether you had a house and then you had a secret chamber, you know, it's almost like kids when they build a fort and they have their own little area type thing. So yeah, different comics. I mean, not just Stan Lee, but other comics too, I guess.
Guess where I am.
I think you're home.
I think I'm home. Okay, well, I'll sign off here and we'll see you on the flip side.
Okie doke.
Okay.
We'll talk to you later. Okay. Bye. Bye.